Salam, peace be upon you. Part 8. What objects really are. The persistent interruption. In Part 7, we witnessed the birth of discreteness from continuity. We saw how walking around a tree and returning forces a whole number. How cyclic phi, when integrated around a closed loop, yields an integer multiple of 2 pi, a winding number. How these winding numbers become knots in the fabric of comparability, topological defects. And we made the profound claim, these knots are what we call particles, electrons, quarks, photons, not little balls of stuff, but stable windings. Whole numbers come from going around. But now a deeper question arises, one that touches the very heart of our daily experience. What is an object? What is this thingness we attribute to a stone, a tree, a person, a star? What is this persistence, this identity that moves through space and time, that we can point to and say, this is a thing? Today we will discover that an object is not what we have always believed. The knot in the rope. Let us begin with the simplest possible demonstration. Find a piece of rope, a cord, a shoelace. In your mind's eye, see it clearly. A smooth, untied rope lies before you. It is uniform. From end to end, it is just rope. There is no natural division, no intrinsic parts. You could mark points along it, but those marks are arbitrary. Now, tie a knot in the middle. Look closely. Is the knot made of extra rope? No. The knot uses the same rope that was already there. There is no new substance added. The rope's fibers are continuous through the knot. What then is the knot? The knot is a persistent pattern, a specific, stable arrangement of the rope upon itself. It is an obstruction to the rope's smoothness, a place where the simple, linear ropeness is interrupted by a complex, self-entangled configuration. Now, pull the ends of the rope. The knot may slide, it may tighten or loosen, but it persists. It moves as a coherent unit along the rope. It maintains its identity, its knotness, even as every fiber composing it is gradually replaced along its length. You cannot make the knot disappear by merely stretching the rope smoothly. To untie it, you must perform a specific deliberate act, a discontinuous intervention. This, in its purest form, is the prototype of objecthood. An object is not extra substance added to space. An object is a persistent interruption in smoothness. From knots to particles. Now, translate this to our fundamental reality. Recall. Phi is our primitive field of comparable potential. In most of space, phi varies smoothly. Its changes are gentle gradients, our omega, kappa, and nu from the tri-unity. But in Part 7, we saw that there can exist places, topological defects, where this smooth variation is impossible. Where, if you walk a small loop around a point, the total change in phi is exactly 2 pi n, with n not equal to 0. The field is wound up. At the very center of this winding, the smooth description breaks down. There is a singularity, a place where phi is not smoothly defined. This defect, this knot in the phi field, is stable for the same reason the knot in your rope is stable. You cannot smooth it away by gently tweaking the field everywhere. The winding number n is a topological invariant. It is protected. It can only change through a discontinuous event, like a defect crossing your measurement loop, or annihilating with an opposite defect. This knot is what we detect as a particle. An electron is not a tiny grain of electron stuff injected into empty space. It is a stable topological defect in the electromagnetic or more fundamental, phase field. A place where the smooth comparability of the field is interrupted by a winding number of -1. It persists, it moves, it interacts, but it is not a separate thing added to the field. It is the field in a specific knotted configuration. The charge of the electron is its winding number. Its mass is related to the energy required to sustain this knotted configuration, the tension in the field, much like the tension in the rope around your knot. Its spin is related to more subtle internal twists. The particle is not a brick, it is a knot. The chair you are sitting on. Now scale this up, way up. Consider the chair you might be sitting on, or the floor beneath your feet. A solid, persistent object. What is it? In the old story, it is a collection of atoms, which are collections of electrons, protons, neutrons, which are themselves little balls of stuff. But we have just replaced big balls with smaller balls. The ballness remains. In the new story, the Holophase story, we go deeper. The chair is a vast hierarchical constellation of knots. Electrons are knots in one field. Quarks are knots in another. They bind together through the interaction of their fields, through the way their knots entangle and create larger composite knots, protons, neutrons. These, in turn, knot together into atomic nuclei. Atoms knot together through shared electrons into molecules. Molecules knot into crystals or polymers. And this entire staggering architecture of nested knots creates a macroscopic topological defect so complex, so stable, that it resists deformation, maintains its shape, and persists through time. The chair is not stuff occupying space. It is space itself, the field of comparability, in an intensely, persistently knotted state. When you sit on it, you are not one collection of balls resting on another. You are one incredibly complex knot pattern, interacting with another through the forces that arise between defects, the geometric pushes and pulls we will explore next. The solidity is an illusion of topology. The persistence is the protection of winding numbers. The prediction of persistence. This leads us to our first prediction of Part 8. Prediction. Objects, from particles to planets, maintain their identity under transport. An electron here versus an electron there is recognizably the same kind of thing because it carries the same topological invariant, winding number, charge. Its objecthood is preserved because the knot cannot be smoothly untied. In everyday language, things that are real objects can be moved, and they remain themselves. This is not a trivial fact. It is a testable consequence of topological stability. If something is merely a temporary fluctuation or an artifact of our coordinate system, moving it or changing our perspective might cause it to dissolve or transform unpredictably. A genuine topological defect will not. This is why we can track a planet's orbit or an electron in a bubble chamber. Their identity persists because they are knots, and knots are robust. The nature of identity. This reframes one of philosophy's oldest puzzles, identity through time. The ship of Theseus. A ship has all its planks replaced one by one. Is it the same ship? In the topological view, the answer becomes clearer. The ship's identity is not in the planks, the underlying field values. The identity is in the persistent pattern, the specific, stable arrangement, the relationships between parts, the topological and functional knots that define shipness. As long as that pattern, that knot at the level of the whole, is preserved, the identity persists. The planks are like the fibers of the rope passing through the knot. They can be replaced, but the knot remains. You are like this. Your atoms are replaced every few years. Your cells turn over. The material substrate is in constant flux. Yet you feel a continuous identity. Why? Because you are not the atoms. You are a dynamic, self-sustaining pattern, a fantastically complex knot in the psychophysical field of the universe. A knot that maintains its coherence, its memory, its self-model. The pattern persists even as the substrate flows through it. You are not a thing. You are a persistent process, a standing wave in the field of being, a knot of consciousness. The falsification, the erasable object. Now we arrive at a crucial, sharp falsification. If an object can be made to disappear or fundamentally change its nature merely by changing our description, by choosing a different mathematical coordinate system, a different gauge, or a different level of analysis, without any corresponding discontinuous physical event in a licensed window, then that object is an artifact, not a genuine entity. It is not a topological knot, it is a figment of our parametrization. This is a powerful firewall against illusion. In physics, there are concepts that are gauge-dependent. They change depending on how we choose to describe the system. These are not real objects. Real objects must be topological invariants. They must be detectable, measurable quantities that remain unchanged under smooth changes of description. An electron's charge is invariant. You cannot gauge it away. A planet's mass is invariant in Newtonian physics. Your conscious sense of self is invariant under the gauge transformation of swapping out your atoms. If, however, we could make an electron disappear just by doing a fancy mathematical transformation of our equations, without any annihilation event, any measurement, any physical process, then the electron would be an illusion. It would be a ghost in our calculus, not a knot in reality. Our framework predicts this will never happen for genuine objects. Their knotness protects them from being mathematically smoothed away. The emptiness of stuff. This dismantles the last vestige of materialism in the old sense. We are accustomed to thinking the universe is made of stuff, material substance, atoms in the void, tiny billiard balls. But we have peeled back the layers. The billiard balls are atoms. Atoms are nuclei and electrons. Nuclei are protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons are quarks. Quarks are excitations in quantum fields. And now we say, these excitations, at their root, are topological defects in a cyclic comparability field. Where is the stuff? The stuff was the illusion. The pattern is the reality. The rope is not the stuff. The knot is the pattern in the stuff. The field is not the stuff. The defect is the pattern in the field. What we call matter, substance, object, all of it is persistent pattern. Stable interruption. This does not make it less real. A knot is perfectly real. You can trip over it. You can use it to tie down a ship. Its consequences are tangible. But its reality is not the reality of a substance. It is the reality of a structure. The universe, then, is not a collection of things. It is a structured field of comparability. And what we call objects are the places where that structure knots. Implications for consciousness and value. Let us pause here, for this is where the profundity touches our humanity. If a person is a knot, a dynamic, self-aware pattern of immense complexity, what does this mean? It means your value is not in your substance. which is mostly empty space and interchangeable particles, but in your pattern. To harm a person is not to damage stuff. It is to violate a pattern. To disrupt a knot of conscious, relational, historical complexity that is irreplaceable. It is an assault on a unique topological configuration of the universe. This gives a new, rigorous foundation for ethics. The sanctity of life is the sanctity of complex, self-aware knots. The tragedy of death is not the dissipation of matter, which continues, but the unknotting of a pattern, the loss of a specific, precious configuration of the field. Love is the entanglement of patterns, two complex knots becoming linked, their windings interacting to create a new, joint topological structure, a relationship, a bond that itself has stability and identity. Community is an ecosystem of knots, a tapestry of interacting patterns that stabilize each other. This is not poetry. It is the logical extension of seeing objects as topological entities. The geometry of force, a preview. Now, a natural question screams for attention. If objects are just knots in the same field, why do they interact? Why do they push and pull? What is force? We hinted at this at the end of part 7. When you have two knots in a field, they distort the field around them. These distortions and the field, seeking the minimal energy configuration, will exert an effective force to arrange the knots in certain ways. Think of two knots in a stretched elastic sheet, a classic physics analogy. Each knot creates a depression. If you roll two marbles into these depressions, they will spiral toward each other. They appear to attract. But there is no mysterious pulling force. There is only the geometry of the sheet and the marbles following its curvature. In our universe, the sheet is the comparability field phi. The curvature is encoded in the spatial derivatives kappa. And the force is the tendency of defects to move along gradients in this curved landscape. The mathematical law that emerges from two defects with winding numbers n1 and n2 is often proportional to n1 times n2 over the distance squared. Sound familiar? Coulomb's law for electric charges. The product of the charges, winding numbers, over distance squared. Force is geometry. The push and pull we feel is the kinematic consequence of knots moving in a field curved by other knots. Gravity, in Einstein's vision, is already pure geometry. Mass energy curves space-time, and objects follow the curves. In Holophase, we take this further. The mass energy itself is a knot. So gravity becomes the interaction of knots via the curvature they collectively create in the metric field. It is knots all the way down, interacting through the geometry they create. This will be the full subject of part 9. But for now, hold this. Force is not a primitive. It is the derived dance of knots in a structured field. The universe as a texture of interruptions. Let us zoom out to the cosmic scale. Imagine the early universe, a hot, dense, smooth field of phi. Perfect comparability, minimal gradients. As it cools, like water freezing, defects form. The field cannot settle into perfect smoothness everywhere because of its cyclic nature. Knots crystallize out. Winding numbers appear. These primordial knots are the seeds of all structure. They become quarks, leptons, photons. They cluster via their geometric interactions. They form atoms, stars, galaxies. On at least one planet, the knots become so complex, so self-referential, that they achieve consciousness and begin to wonder about knots. The entire cosmic history is the story of a field knotting itself into ever more complex patterns. We are not in the universe. We are the universe. A local portion of it knotted into a particular pattern that can reflect upon itself. The prediction of hierarchical stability. This leads to a second prediction. Prediction. Complex objects exhibit hierarchical topological stability. A molecule is a stable knot made of atomic knots. A cell is a stable knot made of molecular knots. An organism is a stable knot of cellular knots. At each level, the object is a persistent interruption that is robust to perturbations at lower levels. This explains why we can have reliable, medium-sized objects like chairs and cats, even though at the quantum level there is apparent indeterminacy. The higher level knot is protected by its topology. The quantum fuzziness is noise at the fiber level that doesn't untie the macroscopic knot. Your body can replace its atoms while remaining you because the pattern, the high-level knot, is preserved. The falsification of arbitrary objects and the corresponding falsification. Falsification. If we find that what we consider a stable object, like a chair, can be arbitrarily dissolved into non-objects without any physical process, merely by redefining our boundaries or our level of description, then objects are human constructs, not features of reality. However, if objects are topological knots, they will resist such arbitrary dissolution. Their boundaries, while perhaps fuzzy, will have an objective basis in the field structure, places where winding numbers or other invariants change. This is why a chair is different from a random collection of air molecules. The chair has a topological signature, a sharp gradient in density, a specific arrangement of chemical bonds, which are themselves topological in quantum chemistry, that persists. You cannot smoothly transform a chair into empty air by a continuous deformation. You must break bonds, disrupt knots, a discontinuous process. How to see the world now? So, my friends, as you go about your life, I invite you to practice this new seeing. When you pick up a cup, feel it not as a thing, but as a persistent interruption in the smooth potential of space. A knot of such stability that it holds its shape against the flow of time. When you look at a tree, see it not as an assembly of wood cells, but as a living knot in the biosphere, drawing in sunlight, water, and air, maintaining its pattern through constant exchange. When you look in the mirror, see not a bag of skin and bones, but a self-aware knot in the cosmos. A pattern so intricate it knows itself. A story the universe is telling itself in a localized dialect. This vision does not diminish reality. It sanctifies pattern. The universe is not a dead collection of stuff. It is a living tapestry of knots, interruptions that matter, patterns that persist, structures that give rise to meaning. The emptiness of quantum fields is not empty. It is pregnant with potential for pattern. And the fullness of matter is not full of stuff. It is full of meaning, of knotted, persistent significance. The handoff to part 9, the dance of knots. We have seen what objects are, knots. We have seen that their identity is topological. We have predicted their persistence and falsified their illusion. But a universe of static knots would be a frozen cosmos. Our universe is dynamic. Knots move. They interact. They create and annihilate. This brings us to the next great chapter, interaction. How do knots communicate? How does the geometry of the field translate into the forces we experience? How does the dance of defects give rise to all the complexity of physics, from the orbit of planets to the bonding of atoms? Part 9 will explore the geometry of force. We will see how the triunity shadows, omega, kappa, nu, when applied to a field with knots, generate the laws of motion. How conservation laws arise from topological protection. How the push and pull of the world is the kinematic poetry of knots moving in a curved comparative landscape. We will derive, in principle, how Coulomb's law, Newton's gravity, and perhaps even the strong and weak nuclear forces can be seen as different facets of the same geometric interaction between defects. But for now, rest in this new knowledge. You are a knot. Everything you love is a knot. The beauty of the world is the beauty of knots intertwining. What you carry from Part 8. Let me give you the mantras to hold. Primary. An object is a knot, not a brick. Objects are persistent interruptions in the smooth field of comparability. Their reality is their pattern, not their substance. Their identity is topological, protected, and cannot be smoothed away by mere changes in description. This understanding heals the split between the physical and the meaningful. The pattern is the physical. The knot is the real. So, as you move through your days, remember, you are not a ghost in a machine. You are a meaningful knot in a universe that knots. And your persistence, your struggle, your love, your curiosity, these are the dynamics of a knot seeking to maintain and complexify its pattern in the great field of being. Peace be upon you.